Aaron Rodgers to the Jets, Sean Payton coaching the Broncos, Derek Carr to the Saints. This NFL offseason, moves were definitely made. Welcome to another episode of the Locked On Ultimate NFL Preview. I'm Kainani Stevens. This is a 7-episode series detailing the biggest questions, misconceptions, and storylines from all 8 divisions. You'll get insight and analysis from our local Locked On hosts that know these teams better than anyone. You can find out where your teams and favorite players stack up with a division perspective and a national perspective. You can find all 7 episodes on Locked On NFL's YouTube page or wherever you get your podcasts. The Ultimate NFL Preview is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match of up to $100. The pieces never stop moving in the NFL. Not all moves are Aaron Rodgers to the New York Jets, but a lot of moves have lasting effects on their divisions. But what were the biggest moves? One of the moves that was made has one of our NFC West hosts very happy. Doug McCain of Locked On Rams, Corbin Smith of Locked On Seahawks, Brian Peacock of Locked On 49ers, and Alex Clancy of Locked On Cardinals are here to break down the NFC West. Alex, what move for the Cardinals made your day?
I don't think you'll ever see a bigger smile on my big dumb face than right now. The removal of Steve Keim and Cliff Kingsbury from their post. The way I describe what Steve Keim has done is you have a young kid, or when you were growing up, you always had a friend that would come over, play with your toys, and then would leave and not help you clean up. And that's where Steve Keim left the Arizona Cardinals. And that's what we're dealing with now. Jonathan Gannon coming in, Monty Ossenfort nailing the draft by all metrics that are obviously all future-paced. That has been a breath of fresh yet uncertain air in State Farm Stadium in Phoenix that hasn't been realized over the last decade, with Steve Keim continuously getting extensions that he didn't deserve. Cliff Kingsbury coming in, thinking he was going to get fired the first half of the first game against Detroit, that Kyler Murray put this team on his shoulder and came back and tied. Kyler Murray has won despite Cliff Kingsbury. This team has won despite Cliff Kingsbury and Steve Keim. And now with the Arizona Cardinals 2.0, as I've called it, ushered in, that is the biggest offseason move that I could have ever hoped for, that I could have ever wished for, and that Arizona Cardinals fans would hopefully bear the most fruits of Michael Bidwell's labors from. So that's got to be it for me.
Brian, where do you see the biggest move went down in the offseason?
I got to tell you, my 49ers made the most annoying move, and that was adding Sam Darnold. And it's been the biggest move that we've talked about on our podcast all offseason long. Trey Lance versus Sam Darnold and the battle for the backup quarterback. But with Brock Purdy coming back and him being healthy, that was the biggest thing that happened for the 49ers. And I think I agree with Alex. I think some of the things they did that aren't for right now, especially the way, and I don't know if Jonathan Gannon's the right guy for the job in Arizona, but the way they navigated the draft and adding future picks, and I think that was a master stroke. So we won't see the fruits of that for a while probably, but I think those were for some phenomenal moves in a division that didn't have a ton of earth-shattering moves in the offseason. The biggest move on the field for the Niners was stealing away someone else from the division's best defensive lineman in Javon Hargrave and putting him next to Nick Bosa, which should free him up, which I think was huge for the 49ers' already stout defense.
Corbin, is there anything that happened in the last couple of months that you feel like was a big move or is going to make a big difference come season time?
You know, watching this Seahawks team for the last several years, it's been kind of annoying seeing all the interior defensive line talent that seemingly every other team in this division had. And then for Seattle to go out and finally say, we're going to spend some money in free agency. They get Draymond Jones, and they've just been stealing candy from a baby with the Denver Broncos, just taking all their good players and then dishing off Russell Wilson to them. But Draymond Jones is one of 4 players at the defensive tackle position the last 4 years or last 3 years to have at least 5.5 sacks every season. He has been consistent. He has been dominant at times, and he has been fantastic in training camp. They are really excited to see what he is going to do for this defense. And honorable mention, bringing back number 54 in the middle. This was the 30th ranked run defense in the league. That ain't going to happen again with Bobby Wagner roaming the middle, especially with Draymond Jones now up in the trenches. Draymond Jones is also a really underrated run defender. PFF gives him terrible grades, and that's proof that we shouldn't follow PFF grades because he is a fantastic run defender. So those 2 additions, that's why the Seahawks have closed the gap. Don't know if it means they win this division, but they have gotten close to the 49ers by adding those 2 players.
Doug, where do you weigh in on it? Do you feel like there was something in particular? Or do you feel like once the season starts, we'll figure out what the biggest move was?
Oh, I was going to say Hargrave. I mean, that was the ultimate rich get richer scenario. You guys out there adding infinity stones in San Francisco. To think of him alongside Bosa and Armstead, that defense just got even more ferocious. I mean, 18.5 sacks last 2 seasons. So that was a big boost, but I think I'll stay in-house. I mean, I'm a big Sean McVay guy. He can't throw the football like your head coach, Corbin Pete Carroll. He can't sling the rock like Pete Carroll was the other day, but Sean McVay's a superstar head coach. He's a rock star head coach. There was a lot of talk that he was going to retire, that he was burned down, youngest head coach ever to win the Super Bowl. Maybe he goes the John Madden route. He was offered $100 million with Amazon, right? So that was really my big fear. So the fact that he's back in Los Angeles, that he's thinking for the future, I think he is here to stay for, at the very least, one more run with this core. So you lose Sean McVay and you look at the coach we had before him, Jeff Fisher. He's not very popular in LA. I mean, he's someone that was always saying, F that 7-9 BS, right? So Sean McVay brought stability. He's a superstar. He won a Super Bowl in 2021. So having him back in Rams, Soul and Royal was really the big acquisition for me, just making sure that he did not leave.
Not on the field headliners like some other divisions in the AFC West, joined by your boy Q of Locked On Raiders, Cody Rourke of Locked On Broncos, Ryan Tracy from Locked On Chiefs, and Daniel Wade of Locked On Chargers. Ryan, what was the biggest move in this division?
I think when you're talking about impact and the big moves, they come from the top of the food chain. And for me, it may not be apparent immediately, although we'll ask them in Denver. But I think in the end, we look down this road here in 2 to 3 years, we're going to see that the Payton hire was the biggest move that happened this offseason across this division, and it will have an echo through the next few years.
Cody, is that the biggest thing that changed?
I think from an operations standpoint, yeah, for the Broncos, Payton's obviously a big addition. He was brought in to change the culture, and I've seen firsthand just how different things are. I mean, media access has changed from what we've been normally accustomed to, and Payton has his hand on the entire operation. If you're attending practice, you see how things are going between facilitating player interviews and things like that with the media and the PR department. It's Payton's running. He's got his hands on that. If I had to go from like a player standpoint, for me, I think one of the biggest positional moves that impacted the AFC West, I think, is the Chargers drafting Quentin Johnston. I think adding him to that receiving mix there with obviously Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, it's kind of scary because the Chargers have always needed this number 3 wide receiver, not necessarily in that order, but they've needed a guy who could maybe take the pressure off that, because defenses are going to focus on Keenan. They're going to focus on Mike. Now they have another guy. It's just, how do you play this offense? To me, I think from a positional aspect, that is the biggest move of the offseason so far.
I mean, I agree with him personal-wise. I mean, I think looking at the tackle situation in Kansas City, switching both of your starting tackles, I think will be a big move that has, we'll see how that plays out in the division. I agree with Quentin Johnston, especially getting someone that can do something with the ball in his hands is just something the Chargers had none of in their wide receiver room. I think it's still Sean Payton. I mean, when someone like that comes in the way that he did, just, setting the rest of the league on fire like we saw him do, I think that's going to be the biggest move in the division. But I do think an underrated move was Kellen Moore. I mean, maybe how you feel about Kellen Moore being the Chargers offensive coordinator has a lot to do how you feel about, Jason Garrett or Mike McCarthy. But I don't think of either of those two guys and think that Kellen Moore is going to be worse without those guys, right? Those are not, maybe that's just my own opinion. But I do think when you're talking about a team that was in the playoff with the Cowboys last year and had Cooper Rush starting as many games as they did, I think that answers a lot of the questions about whether or not Kellen Moore can adapt his offense to the players he has at his disposal. I know what the offense has been under Joe Lombardi the last 2 seasons, and obviously just since Justin Herbert came into the league. If there is really another full level for Justin Herbert to get to, now that he has been financially compensated, and I know that is taken away off of his back, not added one onto it, I think that is something that could play a huge part in what happens in this division.
Yeah, I mean, I go with Sean Payton for 2 reasons. I think that was the biggest move. One, I think that was what Denver needed. As Cody's mentioned many times that, Denver, things are different there now. And, it looked like Russell Wilson was humbled and he has an opportunity to be the Russell Wilson he was in Seattle, which I think is great for Denver. I think the whole culture thing, I think that's a real deal. And Sean Payton is trying to change that culture in Denver. So I think that's awesome. I also think it was a really good move by Denver because it didn't allow Sean Payton to stick around and hang out and possibly the Chargers get him. And I know, Daniel, what you mentioned that, Brandon Staley is a really good head coach, but I just remember what I saw from him last. and they was losing.
I don't know if I said that. I don't know if I said that.
Well, I mean, you said he was a good coach.
No, I said that I don't think he's a terrible coach. I mean, a different show at this point, but I think that he gets a ton of heat for taking a super banged up roster to a 10-7 record into the playoffs. I mean, he's going to have to prove it. Results are going to be what happens at the end of the day when you have that quarterback. But I don't know. I wouldn't go on the limb and say he's a great coach. He has to prove that still.
I guess the best way to say it is that the Chargers didn't get him and the Broncos did, so that's a big deal.
Every year, players move, teams, trades happen, players sign new contracts, but which move is going to end up being the biggest move in the NFC North? Peter Bukowski of Locked On Packers, Matt Derry of Locked On Lions, Lauren Cox of Locked On Bears, and Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings are here. We will start with Matt. There was some guy named Aaron Rodgers who left the division, but was that the most impactful move this offseason?
I thought this one was a layup just because of the hype, just because of the coverage, just because of the history that Aaron Rodgers was traded. And obviously this is not something.
Wait, what?
I mean, it's not a shocker to anybody, but I think this is sort of obvious. When you have that kind of cachet, despite certain people on this thread that can't stand him.
Lauren.
I think it's pretty obvious, and it's going to be weird watching Packer games, whether it's against the Lions, Vikings, Bears, whomever, and not seeing number 12 out there. But I think we've all been prepared for it. But to me, this was a no-brainer.
The answer would be Aaron Rodgers, if not for his level of play last year. If he had been if he had been traded post 2021 as the MVP of the league or something, let's say approximating that level of play, right. I think no doubt it is a layup. But if Kirk Cousins played better than Aaron Rodgers last year, Jared Goff played better than Aaron Rodgers last year, that brings me no joy to say to you three fine gentlemen and Kai, it just is not the same sort of thing. And so this was actually for me between two people, and one was DJ Moore. I'll let Lauren get on his soapbox about that. It says a lot. People think that the Vikings defense is going to be better than the Packers defense. And there are some people who believe that that's going to be true because of one person, Brian Flores. And to me, that was the most annoying move of the offseason. Now, that part of that is my Rodgers bias. I was very excited and very ready to see Jordan Love, but Brian Flores going to Minnesota was one of those damn it, come on. And I have to watch Joe Barry every week. And the personnel is still bad in Minnesota, but the fact that I believe he will make that defense better than it reasonably should be with the personnel because he is that good of a defensive coordinator, I think that raises their ceiling higher than it should. And I think the Packers don't need to get a ton from Jordan Love to get what Aaron Rodgers gave them just this last year. So to me, it's either DJ Moore or Brian Flores.
It's funny because if you ask any Vikings fan what the biggest move of the offseason is, they'll say it's that, which is when do you ever hear that about a coaching thing? It's usually a trade.
That's not a head coach.
Yeah, that's not a head coach. But I think it has to be the Rodgers thing, and I think I'm just approaching it differently because I'm with you where even if you kept Rodgers, you're going to get 1-2 more years out of him. It was happening eventually, but this is the year now that it has happened. And this is a new chapter for the Packers. Yeah. And whether it has an outsized impact on the difference between specifically 2022 and 2023 for the Packers, this is now the team that has won the most division titles in the last 30 years by a long shot. And they are now going into a chapter beyond that. They are off into the great beyond. And for the first time in years and years and years and years, we don't really know how good the Packers are going to be. That's so crazy. That feels like it's a seismic shift in the power structure of the division.
I would say, though, if Aaron Rodgers was here, I'm not sure we would know how good the Packers were going to be. You know what I mean? And so the question of what's the biggest offseason move, I think,
the decline of Rodgers and the departure of Rodgers sort of are part and parcel.
Sure. I think that's fair. But I think the Aaron Rodgers move is the biggest in terms of attention, the biggest in terms of size and sort of structurally big, but in terms of impactful on the team this year and the team in the future on the field, it's the Chicago Bears. It's not just the DJ Moore trade. It's not just DJ Moore. It's the trade down from the number 1 overall pick to the 9th pick and eventually the 10th pick of not only adding DJ Moore, but getting 2 future first-round picks, plus multiple future second-round picks, plus multiple draft picks later on, and the number 1 wide receiver. It has that immediate impact of Justin Fields getting a top receiver and more draft picks this year to start developing this roster, but it's multiple future first-round picks the next 2 seasons plus future second-round pick. Like, this Bears team has so much draft capital to be able to set up and completely change the direction of this franchise just by having that number 1 overall pick and turning it into many different things. And I think it's got the immediate and the long-term impact, whereas the Rodgers thing, like, the Packers team, as Peter said, like, Aaron Rodgers wasn't as good last season, and Jordan Love has the potential to be as good as Rodgers was last season, which is not as good as Rodgers was total. But as far as the on-field impact, yes, the Packers got a first-round pick also that will affect their franchise. But we may still have some of the same questions about the Packers either way on the field. Well, certainly directionally, it's big for the change of the franchise. But X's and O's wise, I think the Bears had a bigger impact moving down from 1 to 9.
I think the other part of this, and Luke, I think your point about, yes, we knew it was going to happen, but this is the year it happened is spot on. And so it's a little bit different because I've been preparing for it in a way that maybe, you guys haven't.
Softens the impact.
Right. Sure, but also the Packers prepared for it when they drafted Jordan Love. And so that makes this different. We saw a seismic shift in the approach of the Chicago Bears this offseason. Last year, Equanimeous St. Brown was the big offseason pass catching acquisition for the Bears.
No, sir. It was Byron Pringle.
Okay. Well, it ended up being Equanimeous St. Brown. It was supposed to be Byron Pringle, and it ended up being EQ.
Surely Chase Claypool will get a mention eventually in this.
And I promise we didn't make up either of those names. We are not that creative, but it seems like we did. But then they go out, and not just Lauren, I love your point about it's not just DJ Moore, it's the trade. Because not only did they get DJ Moore and all the future draft capital, who did they take with their pick? Another player, Darnell Wright, the offensive tackle from Tennessee, to help Justin Fields. And so now they are set up. This is the year. I think this might be the only team, and Luke, you can tell me about what you think of the Kirk Cousins future, but this might be the only team where the starting quarterback this year, if things go poorly, depending on how poorly they go, will not be the starting quarterback next year. I think Justin Fields is under that kind of pressure to perform, and the team has set that up by doing everything they can to support him. If he does not show it this year, it's over in Chicago. The Packers have set themselves up to, if they need to move on from Jordan Love, they can, but also they've set this up like this is a 2-year thing. We're going to give Jordan Love some time, all these young players. We're going to let this marinate and then see what we have to do down the road. I think that's why this for me, I've talked myself into now that it's Chicago.
To answer your question briefly, I think for Kirk Cousins to stay in Minnesota, he probably has to at least go to the NFC Championship.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. And I think
it's future 49ers quarterback Kirk Cousins is what you're saying.
Oh, geez.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, one more biggest offseason move that's under the radar is Chauncey Gardner-Johnson in Detroit. That was a pretty big signing from a leadership perspective, and they love him. So watch that one too.
Coming up, we get the other side of the Aaron Rodgers trade. Was he the biggest addition in the AFC East? That's next on the Locked On Ultimate NFL Preview. If you haven't started using Prize Picks, now is the time. Prize Picks is the most fun that you can have by winning 25 times your money this football season. You just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and then place your entry. Testing your skills on Prize Picks this football season is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Prize Picks is really simple to play. You make your picks and submit an entry. You can do it in less than 60 seconds. Prize Picks offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25%. To provide even more value. PrizePicks now offers Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account this football season. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use our code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match of up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use our code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match of up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. We continue our look at the biggest moves in each division. This is Aaron Rodgers, right? We can all agree in the AFC East. Kyle Krabs of Locked On Dolphins, Joe Marino of Locked On Bills, Mike Debate from Locked On Patriots, and John Butchko from Locked On Jets are here. Joe, what does this move with the Jets bringing Aaron Rodgers in mean for the Buffalo Bills?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Aaron Rodgers upgrading the quarterback position there to go with that defense should, yield great results for the New York Jets. And that team was knocking on the door of the playoffs last year, but couldn't score a touchdown in their last 3 games. I don't think that's going to be the case anymore with Aaron Rodgers now running this offense. I think there's 2 things that really pop for me when I consider Aaron Rodgers now being with the Jets. Is first of all, that early season schedule is really, really tough. Really tough. And so can they weather the storm a little bit if they have a slow start? And it's tough to go facing teams like the Bills, like the Cowboys, like the Chiefs in your early slate of games where there's so much new. And that's the second part. It's like it's all got to come together for this football team. And I think it softens up for them later on and they can go on a run. But what happens when the Jets go from the darlings of the NFL to, okay, maybe they're 0-2? Maybe they're 3-5 through the first 8. I think those are realistic possibilities, especially for a team that's not really faced adversity. I don't think they're battle tested. And so how does he step in and impact things right away, I think is going to be the big question, because that's when the biggest challenges for the Jets come. They come early in the season and Aaron Rodgers has to hit the ground running.
Kyle, how serious of a challenge does it pose to, have the worst team in the division now has, arguably one of the best quarterbacks we've seen in the past couple of decades?
Yeah, I think it's convenient, Joe. Come on, man. He might not have been in the AFC East, but the whole RELAX with a slow start, relax.
Yeah. We're ready for it. I'm already got it queued up.
Aaron's used to having to tell everybody to chill out early in the season. I agree with you with the degree of difficulty of that schedule, though. And John's made this point throughout the course of this series. The Jets just need competent quarterback play if they get anything similar to what they got last year on the other side of the football. So I certainly think it dramatically changes the dynamics and the expectations for the New York Jets. And they're a team that you want to be playing your best football late in the year. And the saying that I've really found myself adopting is that good teams go on runs mid-season and they get better as you get later into the season. And I think the Jets' schedule does put them in a position to have that manifest itself. So I think that's the thing to be watching for, because I agree with Joe on the slow start, but the way that it shakes out once you get into November, December, you can really start to see the possibilities for New York and if Aaron Rodgers is able to weather that initial storm.
Mike, I like your perspective. We saw Tom Brady play in New England forever. He switched teams very late in his career, going to Tampa and having immediate success. Aaron Rodgers played in Green Bay for a very long time. Now he's in New York. Is this a transition where he can come in and have immediate success similar to what Tom Brady did?
I think he can, because he's got very good talent on both sides of the ball. But you also have to have that competent quarterback play at a high level from Aaron Rodgers, like you saw from Tom Brady when he first went to Tampa Bay. Aaron is motivated. He's definitely playing with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, which is a good thing. You definitely want to see that if you're a Jets fan. So I believe he can do it. And I think Kyle and Joe have hit the nail on the head with their late season schedule, allowing them to make runs. I watched the New England Patriots do this for years, where they started off slow, got better and better as the year went on. And then by the time winter hit, just about every Patriots beat writer was using the old Game of Thrones winter is coming type thing to describe how the Patriots were going to be able to get through December and January. The Jets are definitely built for that. From a Patriots perspective, it means, first off, sorry, John, the Patriots have to take these games seriously against the Jets for the first time in a long while, and they will. They absolutely will with Aaron Rodgers under center. He is 2-2 all-time against Bill Belichick. I know some Patriots fans like to point out that he needed overtime to beat Bailey Zappi and a Patriots backup team last year, but that was in Green Bay. He's got a much better supporting cast in New York this year, so those 2 games are going to be very difficult. The Jets haven't been able to pencil in victories there in quite some time. I think this is the year they finally do it, and just that one victory can help put them over the threshold where they were last year. So this changes a lot for the New York Jets.
John, a lot of compliments coming your way, but what are some actual realistic expectations for what we'll see out of Aaron this year?
Well, I'll begin by talking about Mike. The Jets have come a long way, and I believe the first game preview Mike and I ever did on a crossover show, the quarterback matchup was Tom Brady versus Luke Falk. So the tables have clearly turned here.
Yeah.
I think all of my colleagues hit the nail on the head. It's something I've been talking a lot about on Locked On Jets. The early part of the schedule is a challenge for the Jets, and you have all these new pieces coming together. Rodgers does have experience throwing to a couple of these guys. They brought in Alan Lazard and Randall Cobb from Green Bay, but always takes time to build a bit of chemistry. The schedule, you can never say with 100% certainty who's going to be good, who's going to be bad, because you don't know who's going to suffer injuries unexpectedly. But you can look at this, and I think the smart money is on the tough part of the schedule being early. I look at comparable situations. We mentioned Brady in Tampa Bay. People forget they did not get off to a really hot start in 2020. I think they were like 5-5 around the midway point of the season, and then it all kind of came together late. Another example would be Peyton Manning in Denver in 2012. It took them about a month and a half to get going. They did not win the Super Bowl that year, but they did end with the top seed in the AFC. They ended the year playing their best football. I think you have a lot of different things converging, and I think my colleague said it so well that I don't know if I have that much to add to it, but I just want to agree with them that I think for the Jets, it's all about surviving the first 6 weeks. I've been saying on Locked On Jets, 2-4, I would take that because I think things are going to open up at that point of the season. The schedule gets softer. I also think that the Jets, and I've been complaining about them bringing in a lot of old players this offseason on my show. One of the advantages to this being a more veteran-laden roster, it's a funny roster because the impact talent's young, but kind of the supporting pieces are all on the older side. Having a more experienced roster means I don't think everybody's going to panic at 2-4. And I think that this team just has everything shaping up for them to play their best football down the stretch, and that's when you want to play your best football.
A lot of movement this offseason in the AFC South, but what was the biggest move? John Hickman of Locked On Texans, Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts, Tryler Rowland of Locked On Titans, and Tony Wiggins of Locked On Jaguars weigh in. Zach, let's start with you and the Colts.
Yeah, so I think this move doesn't really apply too much to 2023. Again, it's more for 2024, 2025. But the duo of moves that the Colts made to get Shane Steichen as their head coach and Anthony Richardson as their quarterback in the draft, I just can't imagine a better fit between a quarterback and head coach in this past cycle. And we saw last year with Shane Steichen what he was able to do with Jalen Hurts, take him from that quarterback who couldn't beat out Carson Wentz, a falling Carson Wentz a couple of years ago, and then struggled down the stretch, to turning him into one of the best quarterbacks in all of football. Now, a lot of that credit does go to Jalen Hurts, but Jalen Hurts did that with Shane Steichen as his play caller and Shane Steichen kind of tailoring that offense towards his abilities. Now, when you got a quarterback like Anthony Richardson who has the abilities to be another Cam Newton, to be another Josh Allen with his arm strength, with his rushing ability, with what he brings to the offense, and now you give him a coach that understands how to get the most out of that. I know I'm kind of cheating here by saying two moves, but I think those two moves are the foundations for the Indianapolis Colts going forward. And that head coach and quarterback pairing, again, it might not be big for 2023, but 2024, 2025, when they really hit their stride, I think this is going to be something that we look back on in a couple of years and say that was the biggest thing that any team in this division could have done.
John, in your mind, what was the biggest move in the AFC South?
I got to go with getting DeMeco Ryans for Houston, because without DeMeco Ryans, I don't think this team trades up for Will Anderson. And I think, Zach talks about the future. Well, getting C.J. Stroud was big for the future, but also getting a player like Will Anderson, and Houston has, historically been able to draft good edge rushers, Mario, J.J. Now you get a player that will be a part of your identity that you're building here from year one. They're both going into year one, and so you love that. But DeMeco Ryans, he did so much for this dead franchise. David Culley, Lovie Smith, dead. Nothing was happening. You're still going through the Deshaun Watson issue, and the fan base was just completely out of it. The moment DeMeco was announced as this team's next head coach, the energy came back, the life came back, and with that, this is a team that may not win the division, but they're not going to win 3 games. They're not going to play for a tie. They're not going to go out there and have lousy outings. DeMeco has set a tone and new culture, and I think that's the biggest offseason move in the division, because everybody that wanted a head coach wanted DeMeco. Houston won that bid, and so I got to go with that. That's just me personally.
Tony, what was the biggest move in your opinion within
Calvin really don't count, Tony.
It counts. He got reinstated. It counts.
Does not. Y'all ain't even got to have no domestic over it. It doesn't count. So
okay,
I'm not going to go with him because where I'm going is with this. The Jaguars did absolutely nothing in free agency, and then were very, very conservative in the draft. So the best move that I believe that they made was to do nothing, because now what it does is it means that they're not hedging their bets anymore. Everybody's being accountable. They are going to draft and develop their team. That means it's on the scouts, it's on the GM, it's on the coach, it's on the staff to be able to draft and develop players. If you are going to be in the business of retention, and if you're going to be in the business of taking your own guys and just having this farm system and elevating from within, like we see a lot of the real good teams do over the years, the Chiefs have done it, the Ravens have done it, and have always been very, very good. If you're going to do that, then there's nothing wrong with ticking me and the fans off by not doing anything, but really by doing something, by doing nothing. And that thing that you're doing is saying, no, it's on us. We're going to do our job. We're going to pick the guys that we want that fit our culture, and we're going to develop them from within. So I applaud her for doing it, because if it doesn't work, it gives me a whole bunch of stuff to talk about.
No, Tony, I agree with you 100%. I just want to say one of the reasons that Jacksonville has been a big spender in free agency for so long before this is because they didn't have anybody to spend their money on, because the guys that they drafted didn't always pan out. So I think them doing nothing, like you're saying, deserves the credit that you're giving it, because it's a sign that they're starting to do things the right way, and they're starting to build a franchise the way you're supposed to. They got their couple of little pieces they needed when they got the new staff last year. But I just wanted to say I agree with you that doing nothing is a great sign for them, because it shows that they want to keep their money for guys they believe in-house.
Tyler, was that the biggest move for you, or was there something else that you feel like may make a bigger impact in the division?
No, look, and I feel bad. I think that getting DeAndre Hopkins absolutely big. Rand Carthon being added as the Titans GM is huge if you look at the stuff that's plagued the Titans over the last few years. But the reality is, my answer is Calvin Ridley. Someone has to say it here. Look around at the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Patrick Mahomes had Tyreek Hill with him at the beginning of his career. Josh Allen didn't take off until they got him Stephon Diggs. Joe Burrow, you know what? We could get the offensive lineman, but let's give him his guy, Jamar Chase, and see what happens. The moment that Jalen Hurts gets A.J. Brown, tears in my beer. But that's the point. Every single great young quarterback needs that go-to guy for them to elevate to the next level. Look at all the great quarterbacks throughout history. Tom Brady's best season had Randy Moss, Jerry Rice with Joe Montana, and on and on and on. Throughout history, there's the quarterback and the top-notch receiver who allows them, when they aren't having their best day, when they don't have their best stuff, that guy's going to go out and make plays for them. And then when they're both locked in, they're truly unbeatable. I think that Calvin Ridley is a top 3, top 5 route runner in the entire NFL. I think if we get the best version of Ridley that we saw in Atlanta, it is going to be bad news for everybody else, and those guys are going to be unbeatable. So I think taking Trevor Lawrence and what we saw last year and the progression that he's on right now and giving him that true number one guy, we've seen it before in recent years. That is it's like Mario Kart when you hit the little arrows and it gives you that speed boost. Trevor Lawrence got his speed boost with Calvin Ridley, and I think it's dangerous for the rest of the AFC South and the rest of the NFL.
The NFC East had some interesting additions this offseason, and Landon McCool of Locked On Cowboys, David Harrison of Locked On Commanders, Patricia Traina of Locked On Giants, and Gino Camilleri of Locked On Eagles are here to discuss what the biggest move was. We will start with Patricia. What was the biggest offseason move in the NFC East?
In the division, I'm going to go with the Giants acquiring Darren Waller. That guy is an absolute beast. If he is healthy, he's going to do wonders for that Giants offense. You know, in addition to the speed, he has been unguardable in training camp practices. He's been unguardable in the joint practices that they just had with the Detroit Lions. Waller is going to make a difference for that offense. He's going to open things up along the sides, allow some of those smaller guys to run patterns, get yards after the catch. I mean, we saw plays where he was literally drawing a party around him, which singled up guys on the outside. So Waller is a huge move. I know a lot of people will say, well, what about Saquon Barkley and the Giants not signing him to a long-term deal? They did get him to sign. He is in camp. We'll play this song and dance again next year, but I think the Waller acquisition is huge.
Landon, what, from your point of view, is the biggest move in the division in the offseason?
I mean, I guess we all thought that this was obvious, but we're all going to have our different answers. But to me, there is no other answer than Dan Snyder selling the team to Josh Harris. I mean, this is something that is going to have decades worth of reverberations for that team. I mean, this is a situation that Dan Snyder was, I mean, I hate to say it, a cancer on the Washington Commanders, and was terrible for morale, for decision-making, for everything from top to bottom. Dan Snyder was arguably the worst NFL owner on the team. He may be the worst sports owner in sports. And maybe in sports history. I mean, that's how bad things were. And so for Washington to get out from underneath that shadow, to have that boot lifted off of them, and to have a brand new day. I mean, I don't know that we can express how much of a positive an addition by subtraction that is for the entire team. We can talk about free agents or offseason stuff if you want. I think every one of these teams has made a good addition here or there, but the change of ownership is a brand new day for the Commanders in a way that they've been needing for decades at this point, and it's going to make a huge difference in that team.
David, how have you seen the change so far, and do you feel like that's made all the difference?
Oh, it's massive, and it's not an understatement to call an overstatement to call Dan Snyder a cancer on this organization. It's something that, I mean, as soon as team president Jason Wright and head coach Ron Rivera could actually talk about it happening, they couldn't wait fast enough to say this is going to be great and this is going to be awesome for the organization. We can't wait for it to actually happen. You know what I mean? They soldiered on and they played the good, front-facing members of the organization for as long as they had to. But as soon as they had the opportunity to talk about it, and even just talking to Ron Rivera, he recently got into a little bit of controversy for something he said about the players and Eric Bieniemy, and not saying it maybe the best way he should have said it compared to what he meant to say. But even with that, this is the most relaxed I've ever seen Ron Rivera as a head coach, and it's really cool to see because Ron's a good dude. So it's good to see him, have the opportunity to kind of just enjoy being a football coach again and not having to be this spokesperson for an organization. So, and it's absolutely huge. So, I mean, and not just that, but was it back together Saturday, whatever it was in the first week of training camp, over 10,000 Commanders fans showed up to training camp. And I'll tell you, if you count the players and the staff and the media and the fans that attended every practice for training camp last year, you don't get 10,000 the entire time we did that. So to get all that in one day. And then on Sunday, again, there might have been more fans present on Sunday after the first preseason game. So that's absolutely huge. Really quickly, I will say I think the biggest move in this division, though, as big as that is actually the arrival of Eric Bieniemy. So, everybody's expecting the Washington Commanders to be a defense first team, and they absolutely are. But Eric Bieniemy has intentions on making this offense a weapon of its own, not just a complement to the defense. He wants to make this offense something that's really special. And I know you all watched the Washington Commanders' first preseason game, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. When Jacoby Brissett walked into the end zone against the Cleveland Browns, I don't know, second or third defense, so huge grain of salt here. But when he walked into the end zone on that play, there were 2 touchdowns, wide open opportunities for Jacoby Brissett on that play by design. Either walk in yourself and take the fantasy points for everybody that plays preseason fantasy, or throw the ball to Byron Pringle in the back of the end zone, because both of those options were wide open, and that is what Eric Bieniemy is scheming up for this offense. So while we all sit here and say Commanders defense first, just the offense just don't lose the game, Eric Bieniemy plans on making this offense a winning offense. We'll see if he can get it done, but that's what he plans on doing.
Gino, from your eyes, what was the biggest move from within the NFC East?
Well, obviously the owners drive the ship, right? But this league is driven through the quarterback. And I would say having 75% of the teams just continue on with their quarterbacks and have that continuity going into this year, and Daniel Jones signing an extension, Jalen Hurts signing an extension. The NFC East is a proactive division. They get ahead of the ball. And Landon can attest to this with Dak when they signed him all those years ago. They're probably going to have to sign him again. But getting out ahead on the quarterback market especially, I mean, Daniel Jones and Jalen Hurts, they might be kicking themselves saying, man, what if I waited a couple months there? And that ultimately is the most important position in this sport. And having that guy, having the continuity with the play caller, I think if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We'll see. Daniel Jones, he has Brian Daboll there. You move on from Shane Steichen as he goes to be a head coach, but Brian Johnson is still there. But the one guy pulling the trigger, the quarterback, that's what it comes down to. What is the biggest move? I think just keeping those guys in-house and continuing to roll with what works, and don't fix it if it ain't broken.
Coming up, the most head-scratching answer to this question comes from the AFC North. That's next on the Locked On Ultimate NFL Preview. Did you know that 80% of men will experience hair thinning in their lifetime? It's normal, but it doesn't have to be your fate. You can get ahead of thinning with Nutrafol. If you're tired of weakening or thinning hair and you want to reach your full hair potential, leading hair growth supplement Nutrafol helps improve your hair growth, visible thickness, and visible scalp coverage. Nutrafol's hair growth supplements use physician-formulated, natural, science-backed ingredients. Their drug-free patented technology provides consistent, reliable results. Go to Nutrafol.com/men to take their hair health wellness quiz. Identify causes of thinning hair, and Nutrafol will give you a personalized plan for better hair health through whole body wellness. Nutrafol supports healthy hair growth from within by targeting root causes of thinning, such as stress, hormones, environment, nutrition, lifestyle, and metabolism through whole body health. And it works. In a clinical study, 84% of men showed improvement in their hair after 6 months taking Nutrafol men's hair growth supplements. Take the first step to visibly thicker, healthier hair for a limited time. Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month's subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com/men and enter the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Find out why over 4,000 healthcare professionals recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com/men, spelled Nutrafol.com/men, and enter promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That's Nutrafol.com/men, promo code LOCKEDONNFL. We continue our look at the biggest move in every division. A lot of improvements around the AFC North this offseason. Jeff Lloyd from Locked On Browns, Jake Liskow from Locked On Bengals, Chris Carter from Locked On Steelers, and Kevin Ostreicher from Locked On Ravens are here to discuss who made the biggest move. Kevin, we'll begin with you.
Well, I think a lot of, as I've kind of said all offseason, all four teams had a really good one, but I think the reason I'm picking this one is because it broke a trend, and that is Odell Beckham Jr. signing with the Ravens. Over the course of, you can go back however long, the Ravens have never done this. They used void years on Odell Beckham, and while the Ravens are not getting prime New York Giants Odell Beckham here, but if he gives them low wide receiver 1, high wide receiver 2 potential, that's better than Lamar Jackson one has ever had. And that's what people have been clamoring for here in Baltimore for so many years. Now, while it might not have been the biggest move in terms of, pure talent at a position, I think it was the biggest move because the Ravens finally went in on Lamar Jackson, spent the money. It was a huge deal for him, too. I think it was a slight overpay. I can definitely admit to that, but I think it was a necessary one for what the Ravens wanted to do on offense. And obviously you could argue, should they have gone after DeAndre Hopkins or should they have added this? But we've been talking about it for so many years here in Baltimore of when were the Ravens going to go and get Lamar Jackson, a proven guy. We have to see it with Odell. Can he stay healthy? There are plenty of questions surrounding him. It's a big, high risk, potentially high reward move. But if he can stay healthy, the overpay that the Ravens made for Odell becomes a massive move that could maybe swing a couple things here and there in the division.
I kept my composure this entire time, Kevin, until you said Odell Beckham Jr. going to the Ravens was the biggest move in the AFC North. I mean, that's just some mental gymnastics if I've ever seen them. But sorry, Kai, keep going.
No, please. What was your move? We know it wasn't OBJ. So what do you think the biggest move was?
I mean, I'm between Jim Schwartz and Orlando Brown, a different OBJ who should add a lot of stability for the Cincinnati Bengals. But I just want to give a shout out to making a move that should help the defense of the Cleveland Browns significantly that isn't a player acquisition, because that's been such a huge problem for the Browns. And I think the coaching in general has been a big problem for the Browns. And that's part of the reason. It's not voodoo, Jeff. I think it's been a coaching issue. And so hopefully.
Are you talking about when a certain defensive back coach said Friday after they lost to the Bengals that when T. Higgins and Tyler Ward left the game, it somehow made it harder for them to play against the Bengals? Is that what you're trying to go with?
I think that Jim Schwartz should help, but for the Bengals and Orlando Brown to make a case for the best consensus tackle available in free agency, and one of the biggest issues the Bengals have had has been offensive line play as they get deep into the playoffs and they have injuries piling up there. I think Orlando Brown improves them at left tackle and subsequently improves him at right tackle, where Jonah Williams has taken to that position like a duck to water. It's been a really smooth move for him to that side. So best offseason available tackle, I'll take that for the Bengals and make an argument there.
Jeff, we know you've been pleased with some of the moves that Cleveland's made in the offseason. Which one in particular do you think was the best?
First things first, Kev, the best move for your Ravens was getting Lamar Jackson handled long-term. That was the best move for the Baltimore Ravens by far and away. Now, for the Browns, Dalvin Tomlinson. Look, they've done a lot of work here, but this team, it was putrid. There's no other word I can use. Their defensive tackle play, their interior play. And this is my 7th season now covering the Cleveland Browns. And the best defensive tackle this team had up until this year was Larry Ogunjobi. No disrespect to Larry Ogunjobi. Good player, but still light years away here. They went after any defensive tackle that was available. Javon Hargrave, they were in. They needed to get full-on grown men in here. You can't take one of the most important positions in the NFL, interior defensive line play, and say, oh, well, we're going to throw a third on it this year. Oh, we'll throw a fifth on it next year. Oh, we'll throw a third on it. You have to get a proven commodity. So you get Dalvin Tomlinson in here. You get the late signing of Shelby Harris. And, of course, another third-round pick, Siani Ika, who looks like he should be somebody that can help with the run. But that was the one. Because this defense, and it's not changed much from Joe Woods to Jim Schwartz, they want to get in 1st and 10. They want to get you to 2nd and 8. They want to get the big guys off the field, the extra secondary players, the extra pass rushers. That's the way football is played nowadays. But when you play a team like the Atlanta Falcons and they run the ball down, you throw it 12 plays in a row, and throw it because I guess they kind of felt bad for you to take a break on it. They were humiliated last year in run defense, and they put an onus on it. And you can't hire Jim Schwartz and say, oh, we're going to try to get you this. You got to get players in here. And they absolutely did that. But Dalvin Tomlinson for the Browns is probably the biggest single acquisition they made this offseason.
Chris, are any of those the moves you agree with, or is it someone in Pittsburgh you think was a bigger move?
As far as the other teams, Orlando Brown, I thought was a fantastic move by the Bengals because they need to shore up that offensive line. I felt like if the offensive line of the Bengals was one of the better in the NFL, they would have and might have won back-to-back Super Bowls. I think that has been their biggest Achilles heel. If I was to talk Steelers, I mean, I think their draft class was amazing. These guys, they were all guys that I charted in my top 33. Their top 4 picks were all guys I put in my top 33 on my big board, and I thought that they did a fantastic job in getting talents in key positions. So they've done that very well. But I also picked one free agent they signed, Isaac Seumalo, who I think is a quiet signing that has really come over well. A veteran guard from the Eagles. Jason Kelsey raved about him on his podcast recently because of his leadership and because of his ability to change the line of scrimmage. He has balanced the Steelers' offensive line. I think he's made it easier for whoever's going to be left of him, whether it's Broderick Jones or Dan Moore Jr. to start week 1. He's going to make it easier for that guy to do their job. And across the board, this Steelers offensive line is going to be a lot better than they were at the start of last season when they were really struggling to put anything together.
Is it Derek Carr and then everything else in the NFC South? Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons, James Yarko of Locked On Bucks, Julian Council of Locked On Panthers, and Ross Jackson from Locked On Saints are here. James, what was the biggest offseason move in the division?
To me, it was the Atlanta Falcons signing Jesse Bates. I have watched Jesse Bates spark a defense to go on an absolute tear so many times I've lost count. I'm very close to Cincinnati. I see a lot of Cincinnati Bengals games. I have watched him single-handedly take over games and elevate that defense as a leader, as a contributor, as a playmaker. And the moment he signed with Atlanta, I immediately texted my co-host David. I was like, this is bad news. This is real bad news that Jesse Bates is coming to the NFC South because this guy is incredible. So of all the moves that Atlanta made, they made a ton. New Orleans made a bunch. Carolina made some moves. Nothing stood out as much as Jesse Bates coming to the back end of that Atlanta defense.
Aaron, was that the same for you, or was there another move or addition elsewhere in the league or elsewhere in the division that you thought was a bigger deal?
I wanted to pick Jesse Bates, but, I just wanted to throw some shade at Ross and pick David Onyemata. I could have picked any, of the Falcons free agents. And I was like, we're talking NFC South, so let's keep it in the family and let's talk about the player that the Falcons stole from the New Orleans Saints and David Onyemata. And I think he's going to be a huge addition to that defensive line. He was kind of the Robin to Cam Jordan's Batman. I think he'll be that same sort of role for Grady Jarrett moving forward. And, the Falcons also have Calais Campbell. So there's a lot of free agent defensive players that the team picked up this offseason. And so I think when you look at what move is going to have potentially the most impact this season. I think you look at the Falcons free agent additions like a David Onyemata or Jesse Bates. But I do think if you're projecting long term, what's going to be the move that's going to potentially change the flavor of this division for years to come, it's probably Bryce Young with the Carolina Panthers. He's probably going to be the guy that, the rest of this division is going to be chasing at the quarterback position potentially for years to come. So I think long term, Bryce Young is the answer, but short term, I'll go with David Onyemata.
David Onyemata was much more the Alfred of Cam Jordan's Batman than he ever was the Robin to Cam Jordan's Batman. Just to say.
Oh, I'm glad you said
it's a great addition.
I'm glad you said Bryce Young, Aaron, because I was just like, are we just trying to be creative here? Jesse Bates, a safety. I mean, we just got through with the conversation about how edge and cornerbacks are like the guys on defense that make the biggest kind of plays. And we're talking about
safeties and defensive tackles.
Then we went defensive tackle at Onyemata. Come on. The Carolina Panthers traded up
without telling me you haven't watched Jesse Bates.
He's a good okay, cool. But like
low impact position.
It's a quarterback driven league, y'all. Cool. Yep. He's a safety. He's a good player. Who cares? The Panthers trade up from 9 to number 1. They gave up DJ Moore, a first-round pick next year. They gave up a second-round pick this past draft. They gave up a second-round pick in 2025 to get their quarterback. Like, that's obviously the biggest move of the offseason. The team that sees a division that's still open where Atlanta, Ritter, think he has a chance to be good. We don't know that. Tampa, don't know what the hell you're doing. New Orleans, Derek Carr, that's a short-term thing. Like, they want the long-term play trying to find their quarterback. And we've already said it on this show that who's set up potentially for the best long-term success at quarterback? Probably Carolina with Bryce Young, who was excellent at Alabama. I know there's concerns about his height and weight, even though the only time he ever got hurt because he fell by himself wrongly on his shoulder. And other than that, that was never an issue. So it's very clearly the Carolina Panthers trading up to number 1 to get a quarterback in the NFL, the game of football, quarterbacks. Like, it's not that difficult. It's that obvious. And we talk about clear cut. That's a clear cut one right there.
Ross, is it that obvious to you?
I'm giving Julian all the snaps right now because that's 100% mine. For me, like it was literally the biggest move of the offseason. Like, what are we doing here? Like, outside of the Aaron Rodgers debacle, like, this was literally the biggest thing that happened all offseason was this jump up to the number 1 overall pick, the most coveted thing in the offseason. There's so many possibilities. Every Super Bowl win starts with the number 1 overall selection. And there you go. The Carolina Panthers went up and got that. And I was going to expand a little bit more. I know I could have gone the Derek Carr route here, but I was going to expand a little bit more for the Carolina Panthers of not only going out there and getting their quarterback, but putting a staff around that quarterback that's going to lift that quarterback and make that quarterback better. Going out there and getting a guy like Frank Reich. James, I know you're not high on Frank Reich. I know you're not high on Bryce Young. I'm high on both of the guys. And so to see both of them come to Carolina in the same offseason and this team invests in its future like that, that was undoubtedly the biggest move in the offseason. And Julian, just like you mentioned, it's an actual position, right? It's the most important position on the field. The actual thing that makes a difference for every NFL team is the signal caller, and the Carolina Panthers made no mess about it. They went and got the guy that they wanted. I think that's the biggest move of the offseason, probably around the NFL, save Aaron Rodgers.
Now we're going to turn to our national hosts. Joe Marino and Kyle Krabs of Locked On NFL Scouting are going to discuss how the biggest moves across the NFL affected rosters for good and for bad.
It's hard to not start this conversation with 12, Aaron Rodgers going from Green Bay to the New York Jets to take what was already a stacked AFC conference and just make it that much more complicated. So, Joe, when you think about Rodgers and his arrival / his departure from Green Bay, what domino do you think is the biggest that falls as a result in 2023?
Well, I think it changes the landscape of the AFC East, where the Bills have won the division 3 years in a row. And now all of a sudden, it's not just the Dolphins that are nipping at their heels, it's the Jets as well. And you think about this Jets football team last year, they're right in it, right? They're in the thick of the hunt to make the playoffs. They didn't score a touchdown their last 3 games. I don't think that happens with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. And so we know what this team is defensively with all the talent there and Robert Saleh, the head coach, and his defensive background. But now you add Aaron Rodgers to this offense that has some exciting young pieces like a Garrett Wilson, Elijah Vera Tucker up front, some additions to that offensive line. They've added Dalvin Cook to the backfield with a nucleus that's pretty strong that's in place. And you feel like the way that Aaron Rodgers is going to elevate that offense, is going to position them to be a team that was on the outside looking into the playoffs that is now potentially a legitimate contender in the AFC. And so then when you talk about big moves from this offseason, it has to be Aaron Rodgers.
And what about the pressure in New York? Because obviously you've just outlined this was a team that didn't score a touchdown in the final 3 games down the stretch. They had a very impressive record before losing, 7 of their last 8 football games was what it ended up being. Like they fell apart down the stretch with lack of good quarterback play. And now you're making an aggressive move and trading assets for an older quarterback in Aaron Rodgers. If it doesn't come together, I think that's another piece of why this is such a big move.
Yeah.
Because the Jets are now in this critical intersection as a football team where Joe Douglas had a ton of success with the 2022 NFL draft. But if you look at some of his early picks from the previous seasons that he's been the GM, it had not manifested up until 2022 with consistency with the early picks. Now it feels like the corner's been turned, but what happens if the Jets underachieve with the magnitude of this decision that they've made and how that could potentially shake up New York? I think that's kind of the underlying story to go along with the fact that, yes, you obviously now have the Jets as a legitimate AFC East contender and potentially winning that division. And if that happens and you get home playoff games, like who knows what's going to happen from there?
Yeah, absolutely huge. And Kyle, I think one of the interesting moves that happened as a result of Aaron Rodgers going to the AFC East was the Dolphins, right? They added a huge piece to their coaching staff with Vic Fangio taking over a really talented defense that's going to make the AFC East more competitive.
Yeah, I think the Dolphins last year were really held back by their defense, and they had some defensive injuries, but just the trends across the league and how the game is played, the Dolphins really flew in the face of that. And you see all of these branches off of the Vic Fangio coaching tree that are taking defensive coordinator roles for the idea of presenting vanilla defense and forcing quarterbacks to do all of their work after the snap. And that was the antithesis of what the Dolphins were defensively with Brian Flores and Josh Boyer this past year as the defensive coordinator. So I think it's a big ideological shift. I think it's going to put some of their aging corners, Xavier Howard, Jalen Ramsey, when he comes back from injury, in position to continue to stand out, potentially be in better position to have success. They brought in Bradley Chubb last year at the trade deadline to go with Jalen Phillips. So you have like a really good organic pass rush duo. So you don't have to blitz, which the Dolphins did at as high of a rate as anybody last year. So it's going to be a very different style that when you have the mastermind and the puppet master behind it, it certainly helps give you confidence that it's going to take and it's going to assimilate rather quickly. I don't think you could say the same for Sean Payton in Denver, but when you think about like big league-wide moves, traded a first-round pick for the rights to a head coach. Doesn't happen often. So Sean Payton, as far as other monumental moves, feels like a big one for me a year after Denver went all in for Russell Wilson, what they put in that trade package. It was a disaster with Nathaniel Hackett. How quickly can Sean Payton manifest that turnaround? I think that's another, when you talk about the big chapters of the offseason for teams across the league, that has to be on that list as well.
And how about the Carolina Panthers trading up to number 1 overall for their franchise quarterback, trying to replace Cam Newton? They have sat out the last few drafts when it comes to picking quarterbacks. They said, no longer. We're going all the way up to number 1. We're going to trade future first-round picks. DJ Moore, get out of here. We want Bryce Young. It'd be very interesting to see how that all comes together.
That's it for our conversation on the biggest offseason moves within the division. This is just one of 7 episodes for the Locked On Ultimate NFL Preview. You can head to Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts from for other conversations, including who finishes last in each division, which QB is best, and what's a national misconception about your team that isn't true. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to your favorite local Locked On shows for the best insight on your team every day.